today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Insights into Mikaela Mayer's next move. Mikaela Mayer, the former unified super featherweight champion, now campaigning as a lightweight and potentially above lightweight, saying, I don't have an update for y'all just yet, but my next fight is at 140 and then some.
Mikaela Mayer has always been a tall drink of water, a tall drink of boxing as far as super featherweights go, and even lightweights.
Super lightweights, welterweights. She has the kind of physical dimensions to where she could fill out. She could fill out nicely anywhere in between 130 and 147 pounds.
Be more invigorated and thereby more effective for it.
Stating that Chantel Cameron, and I will most definitely face off eventually. We both want the fight because we know it will be great.
You figure that if her next fight is above lightweight, if it's at 140, maybe her next fight is an eliminator of some kind.
Maybe. Now, Mayer versus Cameron, that's not going to be next because Chantel Cameron has to fight Katie Taylor for a second time, and it's reported to happen at 140 pounds, just like the first fight. Maybe what Mikaela figures is that...
Fuck it. Move up now.
Perhaps what Mikaela figures is she'll get a jump start on 140 campaign, so by the time that outcome is decided, she'll be in position to fight for a title there. Fight the winner.
The winner of Taylor versus Cameron, too, whether it's Katie Taylor or Chantel Cameron.
140 pounds for Mikaela Mayer is a much more comfortable weight than, say, lightweight or super featherweight, those lower weights below 140.
Yeah.
To be clear, I would stay at 135 as I'm mandatory challenger for Katie Taylor, but she has two rematch clauses in place, one with Cameron and one with Serrano. If anything changes, I'll gladly come back down, but in the meantime, I can't wait around. Women's boxing is on fire. Time to let my body do what it wants. I'm a big girl coming for the big girls.
Chantel's one among them. Caroline Dubois is not.
The Chantel Cameron fight, several fights from now, that's not about to go down. And as far as Caroline doesn't have anything Mikaela needs or anything Mikaela wants. Not right now. I've said it many times. Mikaela's after the established fighters, the established names like herself, and the champions at or around this weight. So try as she might,
she's not going to get Mikaela in the ring no time soon.
Sky Sports and the people at Boxer would love to do that fight to get Caroline Dubois, who they are so invested in there with an established fighter and an established name like Mikaela Mayer. But for Mikaela, what's in it for her? While she has their attention,
she don't get nothing fighting Caroline, even if she wins. But what about Natasha?
Natasha Jonas. Myself, I caught wind of Mikaela Mayer's potential move above lightweight. It sounds to me like she's targeting who she might end up fighting this year is Natasha Jonas for Natasha Jonas's newly obtained IBF title. And I made that suggestion that before this year is out, we might see Mayer versus Jonas, to which Mikaela Mayer herself...
She must have liked that idea because she liked that tweet.
Mayer versus Jonas for Mikaela Mayer makes a lot more sense than Mayer versus Dubois. I've said that more than once. I'll say it again.
The way I see it, she ain't gonna give Caroline Dubois the time of day, and she's not about to fight Chantel Cameron. Chantel's busy. But what about Natasha?
We've often talked about how Natasha has no interest, no time for a Terry Harper rematch at 154 pounds for what would have been undisputed. She's not interested. She's down there at 147 now.
Natasha's moved down and Mayer's moving up.
We may be on the eve of a Mayer versus Jonas fight in the United Kingdom on Sky Sports in the UK and ESPN in the US.
Established names.
Mikaela Mayer and Natasha Jonas. Slight edge to Mikaela Mayer, the taller, younger, fresher fighter of the two. She's got a solid jab,
height advantage, reach advantage,
and a decent right hand. She's slightly more defensible than Natasha. I'd give the edge in defense to Mikaela Mayer with the edge in power to Natasha Jonas. Natasha has always been a heavy-handed puncher, a heavy-handed southpaw.
Mikaela Mayer being somewhat taller and somewhat longer than Natasha Jonas could allow her to safely get off that right hand down the pipe.
Straight right hand, often dubbed the southpaw killer. It seems to be a punch that southpaws are particularly susceptible to, more so than orthodox fighters.
And a bit of distance control from Mikaela Mayer could allow her to safely get off that straight right hand. She has to mind Natasha Jonas' straight left.
I think Mikaela Mayer's a little better in the pocket than Natasha Jonas. Natasha does seem vulnerable there, whereas Michaela, she's proficient. We saw that in the Maiva Hamadouche fight.
Jab in the straight of Michaela Mayer's best combinations, but the same is true in reverse when it comes to Natasha, just out of the southpaw stance.
Somewhat of a pick'em fight, somewhat of a 50-50 fight, though, because Michaela Mayer is younger and fresher, somewhat taller and longer than Natasha Jonas, you have to give her the slight edge, even if Natasha Jonas has heavier hands.
Kayla's got long levers of her own and long legs that make for long strides to manage the distance.
Natasha being the more spiteful puncher of the two, often showing more of a mean streak.
Michaela could walk her into some shots, walk her into some punches.
I think before this year is out, we're going to see Mayer versus Jonas. It's only right, and it makes sense for both.
Both Tasha and Michaela.
Let's kick the tires and light the fires, cause we may got us a fight.
Men's welterweight news. Veteran trainer Virgil Hunter on Spence versus Crawford. The first 4 rounds will determine how the fight is going to go.
I don't necessarily agree with that.
I could see Errol Spence Jr. winning the first couple of rounds on activity alone, because Terence Crawford often takes 2 to 3 rounds to get a groove going.
Errol might pick up those rounds, but that doesn't mean he'll win the fight.
Veteran trainer Virgil Hunter, best known for his work with former 2-division champion Andre Vord, gave his take on the upcoming welterweight unification between Errol Spence and Terence Crawford. The contest takes place July 29th, with all the alphabet titles at stake at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. Showtime pay-per-view will carry the event later on this month. The fight can't come soon enough. I'm excited, especially to get both men at their peak. Both men seem hungry and ready to go. I expect an epic night.
Saying that both men are at their peak when they're both in their mid-30s, more or less, is generous to say the least.
Errol Spence Jr. is at his peak, over a year removed from the sport, having gone through what he's gone through physically with the car accident and the retina injury. Is that a peak Errol Spence Jr.? I would argue that a peak Errol Spence Jr. was maybe 2018, 2019, before the car accident.
Bud's in his mid-30s.
Still a great fight, still intriguing, but I think it's generous to say these guys are at their peak. Generous to say the least. Errol has a grind-it-out, that go-get-you mentality. It doesn't make sense to go against what works. In this fight, it's not what I'm going to do to you. The fighter that wins will be the one who's not going to let the other fighter do what he wants to do. I like Errol and the way that he fights. At some point, that grind-out style will slow up as you age. You have to grind every single day. Errol has admitted that he has had a lifestyle that wasn't always good, that does damage the internal organs, that is irreversible. Errol's determination and drive are A+. Who can stop the other guy from doing what he wants to do is going to be a factor in this fight.
Errol's got a style that works up until it doesn't.
Some styles age better with time than some others, and that volume punching, aggressive based style, it's the kind of style that works up until it doesn't.
Seen that backfire for several fighters on numerous occasions, being that aggressive volume puncher that steps into their jab and takes it to the other man.
You've been following this channel the last couple of weeks. You will have heard me say that Errol Spence Jr. opens up more than Terence Crawford, which leaves him open more than Terence Crawford.
Yeah.
Had the fortune to spend one day in the gym with Terence. His physical strength is underrated. The way he is generally built, the way he has stayed in the gym for his entire career and has never gotten out of condition, brings a snap to his punch. He has a real buggy whip snap to his punches. You can feel a snap. He was a wrestler early on, and I've watched him tussle with big guys and get them down to the ground. He is built from the feet up with his physical strength. He can generate a lot of power, Hunter said. Most observers view the contest as a 50-50 fight.
But the bookies don't. They have Terence the slight favorite.
It is true that Terence Crawford is deceptively strong. He does come from a wrestling background. So if many people are pointing to Errol Spence Jr.'s size,
that he's bigger than Terence, beefier than Terence, that don't mean he's stronger than Terence.
The veteran coach believes that either fighter has the ability to pull a rabbit out of his hat if he finds himself down on the cards. If either fighter is down in the fight, he has the ability to come back, even the fight, and take the lead. The first 4 rounds are going to determine how the rest of the fight is going to go. Both men understand that they have to get the respect of the other one real quick. The key for Terence is to stop Errol from doing what he wants to do and hurt him. The key for Errol is to keep grinding. He is going to have his momentum accelerated and try to make it very difficult for Terence.
Counterpunching.
Movement and counterpunching can get Terence Crawford Errol's respect. Walking him into something he doesn't see.
Yeah.
Walking him into something hard could make him think twice. Errol Spence Jr.
His approach is somewhat different. It's just like Virgil says. He's got to try to grind Terrence Crawford down. Try to wear him out and wear him down with volume.
That volume could be enough to sway the judges, win him the rounds, but at some point it becomes dangerous. Dangerous to open up that much.
Because Terrence is a counterpuncher. The more you open up, the more you're open.
Errol's hope is to throw so much at Terrence, so fast, all at one time, that Terrence struggles to find his distance and manage it, find his range.
He's got to try to make Terrence uncomfortable.
And maybe in the first 1 or 2 rounds he can do that, but around round 3 and 4, that's when I see Terrence taking over. That's when I see Terrence getting his distance down, getting Errol's timing down, and working off those counters.
Setting Errol up.
There's not a lot of subtleties to what Errol Spence Jr. does. He's a good textbook boxer with a good textbook jab. He's very conventional like that.
His only real signature is that after a couple of rounds, he throws a couple more punches. He ups the tempo. That's what he does.
Tries to go for the body, a dangerous proposition opposite the ring, a counterpuncher like Terrence Crawford, because if you go for a body shot, that side of your face ain't protected.
And everybody knows that Errol is a body puncher, an accomplished one, so if we know, so does Terrence. He may have something for that.
Terrence's body, given that he fights on his toes and fights on the fly, his body might be hard for Errol to find, and in going for it, he might get walked into a short uppercut, a counter uppercut.
Punch you don't see, those are the ones that take you out.
I think the fight's gonna go a few rounds. I think the fight will go past the midway point.
So for Terrence's sake, he can't afford to let the fight go the distance. He can't afford to rely on the judges to tell everybody who won, because if he does...
The drawback for Terrence is that he is a more economic fighter, more economic puncher than Errol Spence Jr. Errol is characteristically busier in the round. He often sacrifices defense in doing so, though all the same. He throws more punches.
More than Terrence.
The one drawback Terrence has, that he is more economic. He's more of a sharpshooter, whereas Errol is more of a Gatling gun.
There's going to be some fight, some pay-per-view.
Reference to that pay-per-views, Showtime's Stefan Espinoza says that Piracy is depressing pay-per-view buys by at least 30 to 40%.
I can believe that, but Piracy alone, Piracy isn't the only thing cutting into the buy rate of pay-per-views. Piracy is but one factor. Oversaturation of the market is yet another.
In an interview with the Wall Street Journal, a sports business publication, Espinoza peeled back the curtain on pay-per-view process and explained that one of the reasons why much desired fights like Spence versus Crawford often take a long time to make is due to the proliferation of illegal streaming. Espinoza cited the challenge of accurately projecting revenues given the unpredictability of piracy if what the fighters view as fair is not what any of the business people think can be generated because of illegal streaming, then fights do not happen, said Espinoza. Our best guess is that buys are being depressed by at least 30 to 40% due to digital theft.
But what about quality control?
What about the oversaturation of the market by Showtime and the PBC overall, between Showtime and Fox?
When Fox was still in boxing, when they were still in bed with the PBC.
These guys were shelling out more box office fights than anybody, and the problem with that is when you oversaturate the market with that many box office fights, not only do they get less eyes on them,
Which doesn't help the sport grow, by the way.
because so many of the fights are happening behind a paywall, what are intended to be meaningful fights and significant fights. Them being behind a paywall gets them seen by less people, thus less people talk about them.
And then the audience shrinks.
The audience for boxing. Espinoza also explained that tapping into sponsorship avenues for additional ways to drive new revenue are limited because there are simply some brands who do not want to be associated with something that is violent or bloody.
Talks about piracy all the time. Piracy ain't the only reason that buys are down.
Quality control is pretty fucking important too. I mean, Piracy didn't stop Garcia versus Davis from bringing in huge buys, the biggest Showtime has seen in recent memory. Piracy didn't stop that.
Why?
Because there was a grassroots demand for that fight. Amongst a more casual audience than this one, though all the same, there was actually a market to see that fight between Ryan and Gervonta, whereas a fight like David Benavidez versus Caleb Plant. Solid fight that it might be. You see that it didn't bring in much at the box office.
Perhaps it's because it shouldn't have been there.
For me and my money, that should have been a regular Showtime fight, and if it were, more people would have seen it.
Afterwards, more people would have been talking about it.
The fighters' profiles would have grown. It was Errol Spence Jr. that said, "We need y'all to support us to buy pay-per-views and tickets because we've got to show these people in suits and we've got to show these other fighters that there is a reward for taking risks."
Now, there's certainly more of demand for Crawford versus Spence than, say, Benavidez versus Plant or Thurman versus Lugas, on the assumption that they try to build Thurman versus Lugas as a pay-per-view. That's not going to bring in much.
Don't know if it's their intention to bill it as such, to bill it as a pay-per-view, though on the premise that they do, that's not going to bring in much at the box office, and therein lies a dilemma. It's a solid little fight between former champions, but that don't make it box office. That don't mean somebody wants to pay $80 to see that, especially when the competition is staging just as good, if not better fights with no pay-per-view price.
Quality control.
It's got its role to play, just as much, if not more, than Piracy. But then you say, well, if these fights don't belong on pay-per-view, why are they putting them there? And it's in order to satisfy the financial demands of the fighters.
Broadcast partner's not going to break the bank to satisfy the financial demands of an overinflated ego, overinflated egos.
But he's in the business of losing money, so what they do?
They supplement the effort by sticking a fight on pay-per-view, hoping the money will come from me and you.
And when it doesn't, because Piracy is at an all-time high, the sport itself suffers for it.
Some bit of this is fighters and their managers, their teams, not being realistic about their own marquee value, what they should get for a fight. Some bit of it is that.
I mean, Gervonta Davis versus Ryan Garcia might have done great at the box office, but what about Gervonta versus Hector Garcia? Should that really have been a pay-per-view? 2 pay-per-views involving the same guy within that proximity, that's a strain on the customers' wallets, you know. Perhaps you could have given the Hector Luis Garcia fight away.
If they would have put that one on regular Showtime, it would have done great viewership for the platform, bringing more eyes to it.
And what about Benavidez versus Plant? It's the same underlying principle. Some of these fights need to happen on regular Showtime to bring eyes to the platform. Everything can't end up behind a paywall, because if it does,
Less people see them.
they're fighters, the ones that they are invested in. Now, I'm hoping that Spence versus Crawford does robust numbers at the box office. I'm hoping it does.
So I don't know for sure that it'll do 1 million, like Garcia versus Davis.
You know, 600,000, anywhere in between 600,000 and 800,000 buys, that'd be nice.
Canelo did that with Caleb Plant. Hopefully these two can do that with each other.
The fans have got to show up for these guys.